Thanks for joining me today on my YouTube channel. Today I've got a great guest with me, Larry Mandelberg, who is a entrepreneur, business coach, and speaker. And Larry's profile caught my attention. Specifically, I'm going to read it to you. It says, "If change is causing your staff grief, frustration, baldness, or acne, I can help. After all, nobody likes change done onto them. Everybody uh, likes change they do unto others, and I know how to flip that script." And obviously, as you can tell, Larry and I have some things in common. So, Larry, thank you very much for joining me. I consider myself a change agent. I love change. And unfortunately, those in my circle don't always love the fact that I love change. But I just wanted to give you a second, kind of introduce yourself and tell us, how you're adding value to the world.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great intro, John. I appreciate it. I'm fifth generation in a family-owned business that started in the 1850s.
Wow.
So our family has gone through, five generations of evolutionary change from the, agricultural environment, the agricultural age, through the industrial age into the modern age. And I actually bought our first computer in 1973. So my experience, my family's carried all that knowledge forward, and I've been blessed with that experience of my forefathers. Um, I call myself a non-recovering serial entrepreneur. I do believe entrepreneurship is a disease. It's non-fatal, it's non-curable. I've done a lot of teaching and training of entrepreneurs and about entrepreneurship. And to your question, I really appreciate the question. I rarely get that. And the answer is, what am I bringing to the world? The answer to that question is very simple. When I was young, my dad brought a question to me that resulted in my saying, why do businesses fail? And I spent 23 years researching that, 23 years of primary research. And I found answers that have been proven over an 8-year period of proof of concept. My goal, my vision, my purpose on this earth is to help teach organizations how to create environments where staff are happy and productive and love their job, and bosses and managers and supervisors are happy and love their staff. The way I talk about that vision is a world where there is no such thing as a help wanted ad, because everybody that wants to work has a job, and everybody that has a job loves it, and everybody that has employees loves them.
That's really a great way to sum up a lot of the things you and I both mutually believe in. And I post and I write about that a lot. Find your people, find your purpose, live your purpose. There's a lot of people, we all see them every day. They're out there either on whatever social media platform you prefer. They hate their job. They hate what they do. They hate life because they hate their job. And I've got more questions for you about your family business, because that puts a person in an interesting position. But my background isn't that. I was in the Army in logistics. I tried to get out of logistics when I got out of the Army, and it sucked me back in. This August, it'll be 30 years. And it's, to me, I would have never predicted that. And I thank the Army recruiter for guiding me down that path, getting to know me and knowing that, okay, this is what this kid's going to do, because I love what I do. And I happen to be fortunate enough to be aligned with an organization that lets me just go after my passions. So can we talk a little bit about your family business? And quite frankly, I just want to ask the question, how do you think that has set you up to chase your passions?
Yes, and again, great question. So it set me up for success because my family's approach to doing business was healthy and sustainable, as evidenced by its durability over the years. as I referred to earlier. My family also believed strongly in the, what in modern parlance it's called pay it forward. Take knowledge, take gifts, take benefits, take favors, take anything that's come to you that's positive, and pay it forward to the next generation. And for my family, that's the way it's been within the business as well as outside the business. So it's kind of like a double-pronged sword. So there's been a conscious effort, not accidental, but a conscious effort to accumulate knowledge, accumulate wisdom, and for me, one of the keys is to accumulate experience and pay it forward so that the next generation can learn from that experience and use it to take the next step forward. It's a tough thing to do because human nature, unless you're Kant, Immanuel Kant, who's a hero of mine, you really can't learn anything if you don't do it yourself, right? I've been writing my whole life, and I just finished my first book. And I don't care what anybody says. The first time you do something, it's not going to be perfect. Can't be perfect. Can't be as good as you're going to be able to be. And that was a tough thing to do. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. But the ability to convey the knowledge that experience brings and how to leverage that experience is a real rare talent in such that I don't have to do it. I've kind of gotten that experience from somebody else hurting or failing. There was another part of your question that I have since lost because I got so absorbed in that answer. Did I answer everything fully, or do you want to repeat part of it?
No, I think that you did answer the question. So because and I think you actually took it a step further, because I think some people will hear the question and they're going to assume that your family business came with, accumulated wealth and privileges. And I think that you actually answered the question better than I asked it, because that isn't always the case. A lot of times family businesses come with a lot more work than they do profits. They come with a lot more work than they do privilege. And so I love how you answered the question, because I think it also speaks to what we do. And there's a bunch of sarcastic expressions used to describe what a consultant is or what a coach is. And my clients hire me because I can prove to them that I know what I'm talking about. And because every time I set down the path of helping them solve a problem, I have to learn about the root causes. I have to learn about the procedures. I have to learn more detailed information than some of my clients know about their own situations, so that I can come back to them and speak to them from an expert's perspective to say, here's what needs to be done to get you these results. So no, I loved your answer. I appreciate that answer. And I wanted to deviate just slightly from the what we do and how we add value, because that piece of art behind you has had my attention since we started this call. And I was curious, can you talk a little bit about that piece of art? Because it looks fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Um, little context. My wife and I have been married for 43 years, and I started collecting art when I was 18. She started in her 20s. We have about 46, 47 pieces now. 10 of them are what I guess you could call signature pieces. They're pieces that are relatively well known. And we, when we bought the house we live in now, our house was, the walls were full of art. And when we bought this house, we moved in and put all our art up. And our friends came over and said, "Oh, when are you going to put the art up?" I'm like, well, the art is up. The house just ate all the art. And it was funny because we were out of room in the other house. So we've been accumulating since we bought this house in 94. And there's an elevated ceiling in the main living room. There's an architectural proprietariness to this. I hate the word unique. And it's a regional builder that specializes in interior light, unusual design and interior light. So we had this room with a lot of light and a lot of wall space in the house. So we ended up with a lot of empty wall space. So we're looking for this place. That piece that you're seeing is 8 feet across,
Wow.
and it's up 8 feet up off the ground in the vault, just below the vault of the living room. We spent 3 years looking for something to put up there. Finally, we said, we'll just get a rug. So we were down in Carmel one day and walked into a Blue Dog gallery. I'd never heard of Blue Dog before. I had seen the Absolute Blue commercials, Blue Dog, Absolute Blue. I don't know if you remember that. We've heard about Blue Dog Democrats. Didn't know where that came from. But I saw that piece in that gallery and I thought, I'll be damned. That's the piece. Laid down on the floor. It was in the back of the gallery, which had an elevated back end. So there was a little fence so people didn't fall off. It was on that fence. So I got down on the floor, laid on the ground, looked right up in front of it, looked up, said, yep, that works. I went and got my wife, came back. We laid down on the floor, said, I can't afford this. Ask the artist what he's selling it to us for. I think he would talk to us about it. It turns out that George Rodrigue was the most world-renowned painter of Cajun art ever. He had a dog, Tiffany, a white dog, which you don't see there. It sat by his side his entire life. Tiffany died. He was depressed. The governor of Louisiana was having a dignitary from France come to visit and asked Rodrigue to paint Loup Garou, the werewolf dog of the bayou. He didn't know what to paint. There's no image of the Loup Garou. He ended up painting a copy of Tiffany as a ghost. That blue image on your right was huge. It was this first massive piece, his first piece, put it in the gallery. People loved it. He said, I'm not giving you the piece. He is best friends, or was best friends, with Prudhomme, who developed and popularized Cajun cooking. Bill Graham was the largest concert promoter in California for many, many, many years. In the 90s, he was in a helicopter flying to a concert tour to do some concert work, and his helicopter got caught in power lines and he got killed. They had a massive memorial in San Francisco in a park, and Prudhomme was a good friend of Bill Graham. Prudhomme and Rodrigue grew up as kids together. Every time one of them goes, the other one goes. This piece was painted at the Bill Graham Memorial Concert, al fresco, outdoors, 20 plus 30 years ago. The blue dog is Tiffany as she exists today, the ghost. The white dog, which you don't see in this piece, we have it in other pieces, is Tiffany as she sees herself. And if you know anything about women, I know a little bit about women, and I know that they have personalities. Men call it moods, women call it personalities. Like my wife, she has a personality, Myra. That's the cleaner. So when she's cleaning, she's not Nancy, she's Myra. The red dog is Tiffany's alter ego, the wild side, the girl that likes to go out and party. This piece is called Walking with My Wild Side.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Isn't that great?
It is. And I appreciate you sharing the whole story and not just saying, oh, yeah, it was a piece we picked up, blah, blah, blah. That's awesome.
There's a lot to it. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, that's cool. So, Larry, are you at a point where you're able, I know you said you just finished your first book, but are you at a point where you can talk about that?
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
Well, so this is another great story. I'm very blessed with my background, and boy, it's hard to know where to start. So let me just start here. My father had a lot of sayings. You know, one of the things he used to say was, "I'm the most nervous when everything is going smoothly because I know I'm missing something."
Mm-hmm. I respect that.
And I write about the start of this and the start of this book and how this all came about in the introduction, in the preface, in the first chapter. So I was in his office, and he had this little cocoon-like office in the back of the auto parts store. It was an auto parts store. And in the automotive industry, there's two markets. It's what's called the new car market and the aftercar market. The new car market is what you think it is. It's buying new cars, selling new cars. The aftermarket is everything after the car is sold. Fuel, rubber, paint, tin, repairs, accessories, bumpers, windshields, everything. So he said, you realize, so that was our world, right? The automotive aftermarket. He said, I just don't understand how we went from no automobile manufacturers to over 300 automobile manufacturers to three in about 30 years. How in the world does something like that happen? I said, I was a kid. I was 12 years old. I said, hell, I don't know. But I didn't care, right? I didn't care. I was a kid. I didn't care about the automotive dealers and stuff. But it's true. There were dealerships in Europe, but the first dealerships in the US really got started right after 1900. And by 1935, his years were a little off. We were down to basically three. I didn't care about that, but what I wanted to know was why businesses fail. So I started pursuing that. And I created a very specific demographic to identify the target market that I was going to research, because you can't research every business. It's not possible. And what I found was so what I said was, why do they fail? So, and I found the answer to the question. And there's a lot to this story, but let me just shift to the point where I said, I can't take it anymore. I got to write about this. This is how I'm going to change the world. This is how I'm going to make the world better. This is how I'm going to help business. And the book is called Businesses Don't Fail, They Commit Suicide: How to Survive Success and Thrive in Good Times and Bad. So when the elevator speech is asked, what do? I say, I help businesses survive success. And people say, wow, that's fascinating. Now let me connect it to change. Organizations desire stasis, static, not dynamic. They don't want change. Give me a system, give me a process, give me a procedure, teach me how to do it, let me repeat. Organizations, entities. Those entities, every single one of them exists in an environment of constant change. And that change is only getting faster and faster. So how do you balance those two competing realities? The desire for stasis in an environment that is never, ever static for an extended period of time. And what I found was that there's really only three reasons organizations fail. Now, there's two pieces to this. So forgive me if I get a little long-winded here, but the first piece has to do with, who did I look at? Because if you don't understand who I was evaluating, you'll say, well, that doesn't apply to us. So the four demographic criteria are: first, a desire for generational sustainability. Now that means, as the leader of the organization, when I go away, I want what I built to continue and to continue to improve. Organizational, generational sustainability. The second is multiple layers of management, meaning everybody in the company does not all report to the same person. There has to be layers of management in there for my demographic. The third is no primary sources of revenue from retail activity. I don't know retail. You can have retail, you just can't be a primary source. And the fourth is autonomy, which takes out publicly traded companies. What autonomy means is that there are no third-party external sources of control over business decisions. The business can decide what it's going to do based on the business's or the organization's best interests and the interests of those they serve. So that's my market. Ends up being companies between 25 employees and about 1,200 employees is the sweet spot. And it's all based on number of employees, because companies are made up of human beings. Now, there's a thing called corporate life cycle theory. And corporate life cycle theory is the study of how organizations age and die. And it turns out that organizational theory is a little bit like paint by numbers. I can tell you exactly where your business is, where it's been, and where it's going based on looking at where you are in the corporate life cycle or the organizational life cycle. And the reason is because every business is made up of human beings, and human beings have very predictable life cycles, right? We age, we mature, we go through all these things over and over, over and over, over and over. It's predictable, becomes predictable. Suddenly, change now becomes predictable before you have to face it. That's a big deal. Now there's a number of life cycle theorists, and I have my own. I have some that are based on my guru. His name is Itzhak Adizes. What I found was organizations live in one of three stages of maturity: youth, adolescence, and adulthood. And I'm almost done. Youth is narrow and shallow experience. I'm going back to experience, not knowledge, not expertise. Narrow, shallow experience. Adolescence is narrow, deep experience. Adulthood is broad, deep experience. Think about it this way. If you're young and you start, you got a little pit to work out of, right? You keep doing it, you keep doing it, you keep doing it, you dig deeper, you find more about your industry, you find more about your profession. Your experience becomes deeper, right? You get more exposure to your industry. The next level is, oh, we got to deal with stuff that are not part of our industry. Let's start learning about those things. And that's the transition from adolescence to adulthood. And here is the secret. Here is my life's work, and it's very simple. And I can prove it. Every organization in the youth stage of maturity fails only because of a lack of clarity of purpose. Organizations in the adolescent stage of maturity fail only because of a lack of consistency of performance. Let me add some color to that. When you can't deliver consistent performance, you can't make commitments that you know will be lived up to. Nobody can depend on anybody's commitments. Not customers, not employees, not vendors, not staff. In adulthood, the only reason those organizations fail is because of a lack of engagement of people. And let me expand on that a little. When an organization gets large enough in terms of staff, because as you mature through these stages, you grow. You have to accept as a premise, one of the premises is that an organization that isn't growing is dying. Stasis in an organization is death. If you don't continue to grow, eventually the products and services you sell will no longer be valued or needed because the world around you is changing. You'll have no customers. Your customers will die. Your employees will die. I mean, we can take it to crazy extremes. But if you're not growing, you're dying. End of story. If you don't buy that, then I'm not your guy. Don't even listen to me. But when you get into that stage of adulthood, you tend to have a large number of employees, and you have distance in terms of human bodies, heartbeats, between the consumer and leadership. As the consumer's industry changes, understanding those changes has to get through to leadership of the deliverer of benefits. If the deliverer of benefits doesn't understand those changes, they can't adapt, modify, and develop products and services that will continue to serve their existing customers. That's what happened with Sears. That's why Sears went broke, right?
Yeah.
They were selling, nobody wanted. So you have to have people engaged, and you have to have people who are committed to the company. You have to have powerful communication mechanisms. You have to have a sense of purpose within the organization. You cannot feel like a cog in the wheel. You have to be engaged. You have to feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. And this is what I write about. I give the background, the history. I have an assessment tool that was developed. It's a survey. I call it the Business Manager's Reality Index. There are 8 components of measuring organizational maturity. 3 of them measure youth, Three of them measure your degree of clarity of purpose. Three of them measure your degree of consistency of performance, and two measure engagement. 8 of the chapters are each of those 8 components. And in each chapter, I talk about the benefits of doing it. I give an anecdote, a story about how it applies. Usually it's here's where we failed and here's how we fixed it. And then there's a how to create it, how to implement, and how to maintain it. And then, of course, I bring it all together in the end. Now, that was a long story, but that's the book.
Well, I'm fascinated, and usually I'll ask this towards the end, but I want to ask it right now for those watching. And I'll put all these links in the comments of this, and I'll also share all the links anywhere I share this on social media. And obviously, I would ask Larry that you'd share this as well with your audience. How do we find you? How do we find this information? Where can we buy your book?
Yeah, the short answer is you got to figure out how to spell my name. It's pretty easy. Mandelberg. Then you realize that what I am is I'm a businessman. That's what I do. I do business. I talk business. I think business. I work on business. So the website is mandelberg.biz, Bravo, Idaho, Zebra. If you remember the name of the book, Businesses Don't Fail, the book site is businessesdon'tfail.com. And another little hook that's fun for people who may want to get more about my insights and yet not really ready to engage, look at my Mandel blog. Mandelberg.biz/Mandelblog. All of this stuff. And I have a monthly newsletter that goes out. Sign up for the newsletter. I don't get insulted if you don't like it. I'm a little edgy. One of my most popular ones was Nobody Knows Anything. Another one was You Don't Know What Business You're In. Another one is The Client Who Fired Me.
Okay. So my audience, Larry, I'll kind of explain to you a little bit about the people that are going to be watching this. My audience likes stories, and I'll tell you why I know that. In 2020, I made the decision to leave my industry that I'd been in for a long time and sit out my non-compete in the construction industry. So for me, it was retail logistics. Essentially, if you buy furniture, appliances, any household goods, and you have it delivered, that's what I did for a long time. So during this process of me sitting out my non-compete, I brainstormed a couple different ways to say, how do I stay relevant in my industry? Because once this non-compete is up, I'm probably going to want to get back in. The other part of it was in sitting out my non-compete, I went to work for a guy that I know who essentially asked me to serve in a very specific role to help him streamline processes, make his business saleable to investors. So I knew that that gig was short term because I wasn't an industry guy. If he sold the company, I wasn't marketable in that role. So I said, well, I'm going to start sharing on social media. So I started off in 2020 with, if my memory is accurate, I had just under 5,000 direct contacts on LinkedIn, and I had maybe 6,000 followers. Two separate categories, which is weird and hard to explain, but it doesn't always equate to everyone who you're connected with is also a follower. Sometimes they unfollow you. And so the true number, in my opinion, the true success number on LinkedIn is your followers. Because if they're following you, you know that they're actually potentially seeing your content outside of the algorithm. So that was 2020, and it was probably, I think, September of 2020. Over the course of the next probably 10 months, all I did was post as frequently as I could, random thoughts, just to see, engage, and just keep my name out there so people knew I was still alive. Then, non-compete comes up. I'm offered an opportunity to get back into logistics. I take it. At that point, I know for sure my follower count was right around 8,500, and that was in 2020. I think it was July of 2021, and between July of 2021 and today, I have just over 53,000 followers. The majority of those followers came in November of last year. I did what I titled the gratitude series, and through all my leadership writing, I decided every day of the month of November I was going to pick one person from my past who helped me get where I am, and I was going to write a leadership story about what did they teach me and how have I used it. Real stories about
That's a great
failure.
idea.
Yeah, real stories about failure from my behalf. I'm in the process of turning that into a video series to also appear here on YouTube. So I gained over 30,000 followers in the month of November,
Wow.
which, yeah, it was insane growth. Now, the problem is when you start to see that kind of data, it's also a hell of a high, Larry, where you post something and 60,000 people engage with your post that day. The most I've ever had was I posted something and over the course of a week, over 500,000 people engaged with it. So, and here's what I've learned. Um, my followers, they like stories. When I share a story, I get huge engagement. When I share a story about failing and success, huge engagement. And what that tells me is I've got real people following me, people who are feeling the same emotions that I'm writing about. So that's where I think your book will be a hit with some of my followers because of what you talk about. Obviously, it's on LinkedIn. Uh, quite frankly, on all of my other social media channels, I think I have less than 100 followers. My own fault. I have not put any energy into that. I started YouTube 3 weeks ago, and I've been doing, I've been kind of a stalker on Facebook and Instagram, and I really don't like Twitter at all. But I'm trying. I committed this year to posting once a day. So far, I'm failing miserably. And Larry, I'm so bad at posting on Twitter that I literally just go to my own website, I go to my blog, and then I click the Twitter button. I'm like that. That's about all I can do. And it has nothing to do with Elon Musk or anybody. All it has to do with is I really just don't get the format. LinkedIn is kind of my jam. I like the format. I like how it works. The algorithm does kind of piss me off. But here's Larry. Hopefully you'll find this funny. Sunnyvale, California is the headquarters of LinkedIn. They have an office in Omaha where I lived for 15 years. I'm pretty convinced that somebody I fired while I lived there now works for LinkedIn and just, they've got a pin cushion with my name on it. And every time I post something, they stomp. They, so,
Oh, that's hilarious.
yeah. So,
That's
um,
hilarious.
but here's, in the theory of paying it forward, here's my approach. I believe that if you want to get followed, you have to follow. If you want people to comment on your posts, you have to comment on their posts. I believe that if you want people to read your post, you've got to read other people's posts. And so that's really, for me, the part of communication that's important is the actual conversation and the engagement. I can get out on any platform any day and spread my message. But if nobody's hearing it, nobody's challenging it, did I really share anything?
Yeah, well, of course not.
Yeah. So you are a few steps ahead of me because I'm in the process of writing a book. I want my book to focus on leadership related to logistics because there's not a lot of people doing what I do in logistics, specifically in the final mile, big and bulky side of logistics. And I know that there's a lot of people like me coming up, and the people who helped me have either retired or they're going to retire before that next generation comes up. I feel the burden to pick up that that flame and run with it, and help as many people light their flame as I can along the way.
Yeah, you make me want to make a comment.
Go ahead.
First of all, the title of my book came out of a conversation I had, a casual conversation with someone that I hired to do a brand equity analysis for my consulting practice. And she heard it. I didn't even know I said it. And that was that became the title of the book. You just said the final mile, big and bulky. There's a title in that. I
Yeah,
know that it's a common term in that industry. Doesn't change the fact that I don't think there's a book called that. And whether you use that exact thing or not, I don't know that it matters, but that's a great line because it opens up for what does that mean? Tell me more. That's what you're looking for.
yeah,
And the other thing is it's absolute the how do I say this? Writing nonfiction can be grueling, tedious, and painful until you come to grips with the fact that you have to identify the one ideal reader. That one reader. Who is that one reader? And what do they want to know? And what do they want to read? That's who you write to. And in a world of 8 billion people, if you get that one right, your book will be just fine. Don't write it for yourself. Write it for that one person. And everything you write as you write is done with the thought of, I'm trying to satisfy Joe or Mary or whatever you want to name you want to give them. It makes the process joyful because now you're giving to somebody else and it feels that way. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I hate to be that guy that admits this, but while you were talking, 15 other questions just popped into my brain about your process. And, your book is already published, correct?
The book is in the publishing process. The best way to get it is to go to the website and you can sign up for it there. You can sign up, say, I'm interested, let me know when it's available, or just sign up for the newsletter. Anybody that's on one of my mailing lists is going to get a notice of what our release date is. We're targeting, what is this, April 3rd, 15th, 18th. We're targeting late this month. I'm working on the proof copy right now, and as soon as I get the proof copy done, we should be able to have that launch 15 to 18 days later. So we're right in that window.
Okay. And may I ask, did you use a publishing company or did you self-publish? And if so, how'd you choose?
It's a hybrid publisher. It is with a traditional publisher called Page Publishing. They were a traditional publisher in Manhattan and realized that the industry was changing and that they were not going to be able to survive. So they re-engineered their model. And, how can that not just be close to my heart? It makes me get all warm and fuzzy inside. Move the business. And now what they've done, so when you have what's self-publishing or vanity publishing and traditional publishing, both of them are very difficult for most writers. If you want a professional book and you're not Stephen King, in that space in the middle of hybrid publishing, you have a buffet of ranges of publishers that are more like self-publishing or more like traditional. Page is on the traditional end. You have to be accepted by them, and then they provide a suite of services, editing, some marketing, some promotion. It's not a full-on publisher, though. And they were a good resource for me, and they were very cost-effective. I didn't want to learn how to do things like, what does my copyright page have to look like? How do I get registered with my ISBN numbers with the Library of Congress? I didn't want to have to deal with that tactical, granularity. They took all of that stuff off, and I'm pretty happy with them. It's a company. They have weaknesses, but
Yeah.
it was a good experience.
So do you think that you'll do an audio version?
Oh, absolutely. The goal is to have the audio version ready by the time the release date is. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. And I am going to be narrating it.
Oh, good.
Audio, ebook, and physical.
Good. That's exciting. I love it when an author narrates their own book. And only because I'm a huge Audible fan. In fact, I've branched out into Hoopla and Libby and these other formats. So I actually consider myself an expert book listener, and it's always nice when you can hear the actual author's voice because, my wife is a voiceover actress, and so she's constantly reading books, and I mean listening to her books. But when you're listening to the actual author, there's a difference. You can hear the passion for the product.
Absolutely.
And my favorite
That's
is
why
probably.
I'm sorry. This is one of the unique things, I hate that word, about fiction books. fiction really comes to life. I'm sorry, nonfiction really comes to life when the author reads it, because the author's the only one who can really have that deep rooted passion,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yeah, I agree. So, have you, do you know who Jocko is?
No,
Okay. So
doesn't ring a bell.
uh, Jocko is he's an author, former Navy SEAL. He's written leadership books, and what I love about listening to his books, he reads them all himself, and like me, he's got that raspy military voice, and but he doesn't always stick to the script, which is cool because if you've listened to his books long enough and read his books, they're a little bit different. And so when he's reading it, sometimes he'll just go off script, which I just love because it's almost like getting bonus features. So that's absolutely what's going to happen with my book because as we talked earlier, Larry, I can go down a rabbit trail and an hour later realize that they asked me what I wanted for lunch today and I just read them my theory of superior leadership.
I love that. I'm really glad you said that, John, because one of the things that I deal with is this anxiety over making sure that the audio matches the print, right? Whether it's an e-print or a physical print. And you just gave me a way to differentiate the audio that I love.
Yeah, and from a marketing perspective, this is kind of how I've marketed my why people should subscribe to my YouTube channel. In addition to following me on LinkedIn, is on LinkedIn they're going to get the polished, the the guy whose anxiety kicked in and he went through, and I post the majority of my stuff at least 10 days in advance, and most of it I write a month in advance or more. And I've got plenty of time to reread and make sure it's perfect. And Larry, like I told you, my YouTube is live, it's unedited, it's raw, and sometimes I say stupid things. I hope I make people laugh. My secondary hope is that they're not laughing directly at me, but I'm okay if they are.
Yeah, I got to tell you a story about perfection and typos. We have a second for that?
We do.
This is a great story. One of my last brick and mortars, I didn't tell you this, but I've owned 13 different companies. I've never worked for a company I didn't own. And one of the three of them were technology companies, and I absolutely hate technology. That's a whole nother conversation. But um, the last technology company that I had, I sold it at the end of 1999 to 12/31/99. We closed escrow, and it's still in business. So clearly there was something good there. At one point, we had about 8,000 people on our newsletter list. We were getting emails constantly saying, you got a typo here, you got a typo there, you got a grammar error here, you got a grammar there. I said, this is crazy. We're spending 2 days trying to make this frickin' document perfect. This isn't working. And then I got an idea. The first person to identify the typo gets a $25 Amazon gift card.
That's brilliant.
So no longer was it a mistake, it was a intent. And do you know how hard that readership went up? You talk about a spike.
Oh yeah,
Oh my goodness. And we had to literally, it was like seconds, right? We'd send that newsletter out, people would wait, and we'd have to give the winner based on they were 1 second earlier than the person before them or after them. Anyway,
that's
perfection
actually,
does not pay.
it's funny to me that you say that because I watched back one of my videos a week or so ago, and I absolutely overused the word interesting in that video, not because I was looking for filler, but because everything the guy was talking about I was a complete novice to, and it was actually interesting to me.
Mhm.
But when I watched it back, I'm like, wow, I cannot believe I said that so many times. So I actually posted that on LinkedIn that the person who messages me the accurate number of how many times I used the word is going to get a special prize. Uh, Fortunately for me, or unfortunately, I don't know which one it is, I didn't get a single message.
But did you count them?
No, I was going to wait until somebody else told me the number and
That's funny.
then go count them.
Yeah, I'm surprised nobody submitted. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, unless I've missed the message, because sometimes things go straight to that junk mail folder, and then a month later I see it, and then I feel like a jerk. So, but now I'll probably go back and double check just to make sure. So, Larry, I did warn you that I was going to ask you some really off the wall questions to get you thinking. Are you
Mhm.
ready?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, today's Larry, the version of you that you look in the mirror and see right now, gets to go back to 10-year-old Larry. And from a completely positive perspective, because that's kind of my thing, Mr. Positivity, you get to say one sentence to 10-year-old Larry. And that sentence is spend more time with blank. Who is that person that you're going to tell 10-year-old Larry to spend more time with?
Himself.
Fantastic. So, any color behind that?
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask me for advice, and the advice was going to be you've got some rough times ahead. You've got some difficult times ahead. You've got some big wins ahead. Trust your judgment. It's good. Get to know who you are, understand what you are, learn what you like and what you don't like. Don't put up with BS and trust yourself.
Okay, that's fair. You know, and I personally agree with that and the entire sentiment behind it. And one of the pieces of advice that I give folks is get to know yourself, explore emotional intelligence, and what I share with them, and I've shared this in my writing, is about 2 years ago I started really digging deep into emotional intelligence, and what I learned was the anxiety I was causing myself because I was worrying so much about what other people were thinking about me
Mhm.
is all bull. Nobody's thinking about you. And I don't mean that in a bad way that you're nothing, but people are so caught up in themselves and their own situation, they're not worried about Larry's. And the fact is, if they are worried about Larry's, you don't want those people in your life anyway. So no, I love that. That's great. So to flip it up a little bit, um, I don't want to ask an uncomfortable question about how old are you today. So I say, um, if you were going to go talk to 70-year-old Larry, but I don't know how old, based on some of the stories that you've told, that might not be too far off, because I know how old I am, and I know what I was doing during some of the years that you were telling your stories. So let's just say you get to pop ahead 30 years in the future. What is the one piece of advice you're going to give, or I'm sorry, what is the one piece of advice future Larry is going to give you? And generally I steer this towards the vice path. What's the thing that you're doing that you know is not a healthy activity or behavior or a habit that you have that is holding you back? But I'm just going to leave it wide open to you, Larry. If the future Larry comes back and says, hey Larry, stop doing this right now, what would that thing be?
You know, it's an interesting question because it presumes that I know something I'm doing today that's going to be harmful tomorrow. And I'm not sure that I do. If I had to pick one thing, which I certainly could, I would say tell myself 70-year-old Levy, and I don't mind telling you how old I am. I'm 66 years old. I was working at 9 years old. I mean, so I've been doing this, when in high school, when kids were, look, family owned business, 6 o'clock in
Mhm.
the morning, having breakfast. Yeah, you're going to work with me. You'll go to school after you go to work. If that business puts that roof over your head and puts that food on your table, and by God, if you're not in school, you're going to be working. So I love my father, and I say that in a joking way. I've been doing this a long time. I'm only 66 years old, but I have, like I said, I've owned 13 businesses and I've got a lot of experience. What I would probably tell myself is you haven't yet fully grasped how much friction all the clutter you create causes you. You've noticed when you clean it up how good you feel and how productive you become and the benefits that you get, but you still let the clutter build up. you can make great strides going forward if you just don't let that happen anymore. Stop now. Don't wait till now to come to grips with that. And as I think about it, that's probably pretty good advice from 70-year-old Larry.
I think so too. Yeah, that is. So I'll tell you the origin of where the question came from. People ask me all the time, what do you wish you had done earlier? If what do you wish you could have gone back and changed? And I got to be honest, I probably wouldn't change much. There are some people that I hurt that I would like to go back and take that back. But um, if I'm being fully transparent, the pain that I feel thinking about the pain I caused them motivates me to be a better person today. So,
I when we have a set, when you're done, there's a story I got to tell you about questions and what you just said.
that's what motivated the question is I can't pinpoint something I'd go back and change because I feel like it would change who I am today.
Right.
And I love who I am today. I feel like I'm living a great life, and I feel like I've learned enough at a young enough age where I might be able to make a difference. So that's the origin of the question, and that's it.
So let me ask you a rhetorical question and then let me explain. I want you to tell me the 5 best days of your life. Now just process that for a minute.
Hmm.
I was at a party with 8 people, 4 couples. There were 2 people there that I'd never met before, and we were the only 2 people that couple had never met before, and everybody else knew each other. And we were up in the woods for days, isolated, no TV. And this guy has, technically, it's called mild autism. Plus, he's losing his eyesight. So the 4 of us walk into the cabin, and the women go in the kitchen, and the men open the wine and sit down and start pouring wine. And the first thing that happens is this guy with his mild autism, he's very forward and comes across a little overly aggressive if you don't know him. And I'd never met him before. Said, what are the 4 or 5 best days in your life? And man, I had it like that. And then the other guys around the table, I said, I have it, but I'm going to go last. All answered. And then he got to me, and I had all 5 of them, and they were days when I really, the 5 most terrible mistakes I've ever made in my life. And he said, why are those the best days? And I said, because I was given the gift of learning what I was doing that was bad, and I was able to change and recover. What more could you ask from life than to be given the gift of knowing when you're too blind to know your faults and your failures? And one of them was my best friend, who I'd known since grade school, and literally today he and I still talk every other week. We've known each other for over 60 years. I just hurt him and embarrassed him and insulted him, and that was one of those 5 days. So you and I have a lot of, I guess I would say, similar philosophies.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it. And so you might think this is cheesy, but I've documented it so I can prove that this is my answer. The 5 best days of my life: the day that I met my wife,
That's common.
the day that I married my wife,
Okay.
um, the day my first child was born, second
Yep.
child was born, and then the 5th day just got replaced. We were recently on vacation in Virginia, and we went on a hike. We landed in a town called Lexington, Virginia. And if that doesn't pop out, I'll tell you why it's famous. Stonewall Jackson lived there,
Yeah.
VMI is there, and Robert E. Lee died there. Um, so I love history, I love old buildings, and I really love what we can learn from them. So we were stumbling around this old town. We go to have lunch, and we had one of the most amazing meals as a family that we have had in months, maybe years, maybe since the lockdown of COVID, because we were all sitting around the table, not a device in sight, enjoying a meal. Everybody's eating their meal and having young kids. I'm sure you understand what that joy is like. Um, just having conversations, just talking through normal, random things. And it was just a moment where I sat back and I said, this has just become one of the greatest days of my life. So anyway, that's as cheesy as it sounds. If you check my Facebook page, you'll see that I've documented those days.
John, I believe you that everybody else around the table everybody comes up with basically the same thing. It's either the day I met my wife or the day I married my wife, and then when my first child was born. Those are the answers. But to my point, every one of yours was a positive day,
Hmm.
and I was the only one with a negative. All of that stuff is very interesting. There's another thing that you said that I want to share with you and your listeners, because I think this is valuable. This is knowledge. So I have a personal, I don't even know what to call it, credo. I have a daily objective: learn one new thing. So I like to try to give a lot of things that people haven't heard about in the hopes that somebody will get something good out of this. So there was a book written back in the 90s called The Experience Economy. Have you ever heard of it?
I've heard of the book, but I haven't read it.
So I don't know that there's a lot in there that's valuable, but if you want to get into the nuts and bolts, it's valuable, but it's really pretty simple. And you just proved the point. This thing you did in Lexington, you did it when you what? You went to lunch, right?
Yeah.
So you were at a restaurant, right?
Hmm.
So what's the best restaurant you've ever been to? Was it that one in Lexington?
No, probably not.
And the question becomes, when you figure it out, why was it the best restaurant? And you try and answer it, and then you say, well, what did you have for food? And nobody can remember what they ate, because it's not about the food, it's about the experience. And that's what Walt Disney learned 90 years ago. He's trying to create an experience. One of my colleagues, who was in a very senior level mastermind group with me, owned 4 restaurants. And he knew he was in the nastiest segment for survival there was. Restaurants are bad to begin with. His market segment was so oversaturated, and so, I mean, the demands were just, it was brutal. He had to figure out a way to differentiate himself, and he hired one of the people that was a student of this guy and changed the way he did his restaurant so that it's not about the food, it's about the experience. And one of the ways that he changed the experience was by bringing a relevant story about the food, right? So he was having problems procuring quality meat. You can have cheap meat or good meat, and he didn't want cheap meat. He's a coffee shop kind of place, right? Like a click up above Denny's, but he wanted quality food, and he couldn't find a source, a vendor to give him consistent quality beef. So he bought a meat packing company, and then that becomes this. Don't remember the restaurant, but they remember, yeah, the restaurant where the guy who owns it bought a meat packing company just to make sure, and the meat was great. I don't remember what I had, but
Yeah.
story,
Yep.
experience. I
Yes.
love it.
Yeah. Well, Larry, I'm super grateful that you took the time, just off a random weird dude sending you a message on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, let's chat." Um,
This
I
is how I
hope,
learned.
yeah, I agree with you personally, and that's really kind of what's motivated me to do these casual conversations, is that we always learn something new, and what I'm gonna, this is just really cool to me that you said this, but if you go to my website, getdoolin.com, you'll see my banner says, "Be 1% better today than you were yesterday." And I think it goes along with what you said about learn one new thing. Because people ask me all the time, what does that mean, be 1% better? I said, you get to define that. You know you better than anybody else. And for you to be 1% better today than you were yesterday, you have to decide how, where, what are you going to do? And I love that. Learn something new. I plow through books because I've got that mindset that I've got a limited amount of days on this planet. I want to leave it as smart as I can. And so, that's my story. So I'll plug all of the links into the comments of this video, also into the comments of the LinkedIn post that I'll do. Larry, is there anything else that you'd like to put out there into the universe?
there are two passions in my life that are not family. And this vision I told you about is one of them, but the other one is education. And the reason that I believe the reason we have the problems that we have today in this country, the conflicts that we have, you know, the constant arguments, is because we have an uneducated electorate. Our educational system is failing, and one of my passions is I work with an organization that manages schools to come up with creative new ways to educate children. And we did not lose 1 hour of classroom time during the COVID, not 1 hour. And we have over 8,000 students in 3 schools. Find a way to contribute to the education system. Look for a way to make it better. It's your moral responsibility.
Yes, sir. I couldn't agree with that more.
That's my
Well,
final words.
I appreciate that. And um, I hope that if you're watching this, please subscribe. If you click the bell, you'll be notified when videos go live. Feel free to like the video, share the video. And I'm grateful that you took the time to make it all the way through. And what I will say is, in the spirit of Larry's challenge, to the person still listening to this right now, the first person that sends me a private message is going to get a special prize. And if you can't guess what that is, then you didn't listen to the whole video. All right. Thank you for that motivation, Larry. Grateful for it.
John, thank you for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed it.